An innocent black woman was shot and killed in her Louisville, Kentucky home while she was sleeping. So now this happened during a police raid that ended up being at the wrong apartment. Now, the woman's family, this woman, of course, is Breonna Taylor, who was an EMT worker. She was at home with her boyfriend. She was sleeping. And suddenly, cops had burst into that home, into that apartment. Her boyfriend believed that they were being burglarized. So he did what a lot of the Republicans, a lot of conservatives say that you should do during a home invasion. You get your gun and you shoot, right? So her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, fired at these officers in self defense, hitting one. Yes, that officer is still alive, as is Kenneth Walker. In response, the officers blindly fired over 20 times into the apartment, ended up killing Taylor. She was shot 8 times. Now, this happened on March 13th. Now, after the incident, and they call it an incident, right? The Louisville Metro Police said the officers had knocked on the door several times and announced their presence as police officers who were there with a search warrant. Now, of course, that story doesn't necessarily add up, but according to the cops, they said that after forcing their way in, they were immediately met by gunfire, according to Lieutenant Ted Idem. Taylor was shot 8 times. Walker, 27, was arrested and charged with assault and attempted murder on a police officer. So they said they knocked. They said they identified themselves, right? But again, as I mentioned, that doesn't add up. Records showed that the police investigation was centered around a trap house more than 10 miles away from Taylor's apartment, and that a judge had approved of what's called a no-knock search warrant. So, meaning you don't have to knock, you don't have to identify yourselves, you can just barge right in. And that seems to be exactly what they did. Barged in. So now there's more. The lawsuit, launched by the family, says that Taylor and her boyfriend were asleep in the bedroom when police in plain clothes and unmarked vehicles arrived at the house looking for a suspect who lived in a different part of the city. So, according to the lawsuit, these police did not knock. And even if they did, the couple were asleep. And, look, we all know people that can sleep through just about anything. So we don't even know if that's the case, if they're telling the truth on that. But then they entered the home, not dressed up as police officers, with their guns drawn. And Walker's supposed to believe that they weren't up to no good. I mean, think about if you're in that situation. You're, sleeping, with your girlfriend, right? And you get 3 armed thugs crashing through your door. What are you going to do? They're not identified as police officers. They're not dressed as police officers. What do you do? I mean, this is a dream scenario for conservatives, for pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment people. Like, hey, well, they come in my horse, shoot them, blast them. Well, that's what happened. He did that. Oh, they turned out to be undercover plainclothes police officers. And not only that, but they're at the wrong address. And yet he is not supposed to defend himself. They thought that they were criminals. They called the police. Walker had allegedly called 911. And according to the Courier-Journal, police said he opened fire and shot what ended up being one of the officers, who, again, after getting emergency surgery, has survived. Now, Walker was also a legal gun owner, right? So before you jump in with that, there's a thug, got a gun, he's legal. No, he's a legal gun owner, right? He's protecting himself under the Second Amendment. And he had the license to carry, and he had the firearms in his home. Taylor, of course, was unarmed, but she still ended up getting shot 8 times. So they were blindly firing all over the apartment. And they didn't even get the person that was actually shooting at them. Now, what makes all of this even worse, if it's not bad enough already, the person that they were looking for wasn't even there. Wasn't even there. Didn't live there. Wrong address. And was already in police custody. The cops already had him. I mean, my God, man. Now, I would be very curious to hear what that 911 call. Walker called the police and said, hey, the random guys, they said they're police officers. I don't know. They're not dressed like police officers. I'd love to hear that. Love to hear that. Because that would be a huge piece of evidence against these officers. And by the way, it's not as if they're been fired. No, they've been, quote unquote, reassigned. Reassigned. Probably to desk duty. Now, why were they even there in the first place? I mean, that trap house they were supposed to be investigating, right, was 10 miles away. What were they doing in this woman's apartment? Well, they said her address was listed on a search warrant based on an officer's belief, or the department's belief, that a drug suspect had once used her home to receive mail, keep drugs, or stash money. You know what they didn't find in that apartment? Drugs. Nothing. Oh, the warrant also states that a car registered to Taylor was seen parked on several occasions in front of a quote-unquote drug house. What was it, that drug house, or just a random drug house? What is going on? Now, here's the other thing about that, right? I mean, and this would go to, smearing the victims here, right? Oh, they're parked in front of a drug house. They must be druggies. I had to have deserved it. Well, they have no history. Both Taylor and Walker had no history, no criminal history of drug convictions. And again, no drugs in the apartment, nothing. In fact, Walker's like, hey, look, if they had identified themselves as police, I would have let them in. I'd have let them in, and they would have found no drugs, because there's no drugs here. There's nothing here. So yes, he said I would have ushered them in. Instead, they barge in, don't identify themselves as police. They're obviously not dressed as police officers. And so what do? You grab your gun. I mean, what is difficult in this situation to understand? If you're defending these police officers and these ridiculous no-knock raids, and that's why this is ridiculous, right? Because why would anyone think that a no-knock raid by plainclothes police officers in unmarked cars is a good idea in a country full of 300 million guns? You don't think something like this is going to happen? You don't think something like this is going to happen? Of course it is. Oh, but it doesn't happen in rich white neighborhoods, and that's the difference. That's the big difference. This only happens in poorer minority areas. Because, of course. And what a disgusting and horrifying case. And what's worse for me is that, look, not only is this over drugs, which should be legalized anyway. Like, I don't care. Legalize them all, or at least decriminalize them. There's no reason people need to be dying over drugs, right? Being shot by police. Isn't the whole point of making drugs illegal? Hey, we're just trying to protect you. We're trying to protect you from drugs by fatally shooting you over having drugs in your house. Does that make any sense at all? No, it doesn't. It's absolutely ridiculous, right? And so that's ridiculous. And having these no-knock raids also super ridiculous. And it's a complete and utter disaster. And also, the thing that's probably the worst part about this is I have no faith that this family is ever going to get justice. I mean, maybe I hope they do. I hope they do, right? But I have no faith in the system anymore. There's nothing. There's no faith in this. Because how many times have we seen, police walk from murdering African Americans? I can think of so many cases where that's happened, and it's heartbreaking. But part of me thinks, Yeah, they're going to get away with this. I hope I'm wrong. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent progressive media.